Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday the 21st of January 2019, and joining me on this edition is Cars Harlow.
Don't just stand there, kill something.
And Ed Silly.
Let's have an intelligent conversation here. I'll talk and you listen.
It's going to have to be that case, Ed, because reduced team this week, and we're recording on a Sunday night, which is really quite unusual for us, Ed. I was just saying to Kaz, we used to do this, well back in the day. Many years ago, Kaz, we used to record on a Sunday night quite regularly, didn't we?
Yes, we did, yeah. I think it was weekly back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good while back.
I suppose the saving grace is, Ed, that you don't have to stick to your tea and coffee because we're not recording in the morning.
Coffee was done in the morning. I've got a Doom bar on the go now. There's a Sharps Atlantic in reserve, and if things go catastrophically wrong, there's a Banks's, but that's a bit further away. I'd have to stand up to get that.
Yeah, so the first proper podcast of the year, and there's just the three of us, but it's the way things work out. Busy time of the year as well for us in the AV world, because this is where everybody tends to announce what's coming up for the year. So we had CES 2 weeks ago. It feels like a lifetime ago now, but it was 2 weeks ago. I'm just starting to get myself around the jet lag again, and I thought I was on a winning streak because the last two nights I've managed to go to bed at my normal time, get up at my normal time. Today I didn't wake up till midday. Went to bed at my normal time, didn't wake up till midday. I haven't done that since I was a teenager, slept that long, so obviously I needed it. Kaz, you've been over in the States as well. You've been flying over for your other job, so you'll be feeling it as well, are you?
Yes, I've got an immense amount of jet lag. I did New York, and then on my way back I went to Boston, and then flew back from Boston all in the same day.
In the same day? Killer.
Yeah, so up to Boston in the morning. So I was in New York in the morning, and I was in England in the evening, and I was in Boston in between. So that was a fair amount. That was literal planes, trains, and automobiles right there.
Did you actually have John Candy as a wingman? I mean, that would have made it semi-bearable.
I think by the end of it, I was John Candy.
I did. Oh, so you're actually admitting in podcast that you sell shower curtain rings as well as review films?
I do, yes. I do. I get good deals on them as well.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. That could potentially be very useful.
Yeah, those aren't pillows. Right. Ed, what have you been up to?
I have been... I've been working, lots and lots of working. What else have I actually been doing? I went to a different pub quiz, and I didn't know anyone in that pub, so I did the pub quiz on my own, and I won. I was politely asked to not do any more pub quizzes. So that was
right. So just to get this right, so everybody else was in teams of how many?
Between 3 and 6.
And you were there on your lonesome?
Yeah.
And you won? I
did, by 10 points. To be fair, I mean, the questions fell in a really lucky way. Who knows? I don't think that would happen every week, but I've been politely invited not to participate in which was a shame. But, these things happen. What else have I done? I suppose
that's a badge of honour, being asked not to do the pub quiz. I suppose that is a badge of honour because you're just too good.
Yeah, I mean, but the point was to take that. It's like, well, could I not join a team? It's like, yeah, but then there'll be more people. So even if you didn't know the answer, there's a chance that somebody might. It's like, oh, okay. Well, so we'll leave that, or I might go in wearing a really shit disguise before I finally leave Olney, just to see if I can rinse it. But
and what was the prize for winning?
I got some money to spend behind the bar, which, deciding that the discretion is the better part of valor, I did sort of split and buy other people some drinks with.
Right. Okay.
Not least because also if I sat down to try and use it all myself, it would have been a long and dangerous walk back to my house. So that's fine. I'm going to try and segue here because we can segue onto your similar version of this. I have also started the long-term planning because we're now 1 calendar year away from my lease car going back. So I've now started charting because, you've got to have a system. I've started charting the best lease deals available on certain things and plotting them as the car is launched and seeing if some of them are driving off. And obviously I want to see what Brexit does to them and things like that. So I have started the great car game. A vehicle has also immediately lurched into contention, which I never remotely considered owning an example of, but they've started with some competitive lease prices and they might get even more competitive. And I understand that you managed to spectacularly fail at being resilient and waiting to exchange your car and have exchanged it.
Yeah. First of all, let's get your story out of the way. What cars leaped into the lead then for you?
In the lead is a strong term. Sensible me is still considering probably replacing the Fiesta ST with another Fiesta ST.
And I've got to say, I've fallen in love with the new ST. I think it is a astoundingly good car.
But, let's not bore listeners here. You know the specs of the current Fiesta ST. For £8 more a month on their relative lowest lease deals online at the moment, with exactly the same mileage and requirements, I can lease the brand new Megane RS, which is an extra 80 brake and apparently the chassis is biblical.
They are. The thing that usually gets them is depreciation because they don't sell many. But then if you're leasing, I was just about to come on to that. You're not losing the money. The lease company is, so yeah.
And I can order them in bright orange as well, which as someone who's never actually made it past the age of 12, owning a car the colour of a Flymo is I haven't ruled it out. Let's put it like that.
I can't really say anything when it comes to colours of cars because I always go Skittle colours.
Yeah. I mean, there's all this talk about, the police will see you if you're doing 50.5 in a 50 and all the rest of it. But one, don't speed where it's abundantly clear that people are paying attention to your speeding or not. And two, life is too short to own black cars.
Yeah. I've got to say, and I noticed it in the States as well when I was over there recently. Everything is grey, silver, or black, or white. And that's just so, everything just blends into everything else. And there was an interesting piece out the other day on the top 10 selling colours in the UK, and the best selling car was grey. Primer grey was the best colour you could get. So I've gone from bright green on the next car. I went to the dealers to see it. It came in earlier than expected. Normally it's a 6-month waiting list. It used to be 12-month waiting list for the Mustang. Was expecting it to be at least 6 months, and it's turned up early. It got an early ship over the pond, and it's turned up at the dealership. So I went to see it the other day. Obviously, Mr. Dealer, who doesn't listen to the podcast, thank God, desperate to get his numbers for January. Me, not that bothered if I picked the car up or not. I've already got a Mustang. The weather's not great. So I made sure that he knew that was my way of thinking. Went out and valued my car. My car was in negative EC. And I said, nope, not going to do it because it'll be in positive equity by the time we get to March. So it'll wash its face. And that's all I'm looking for. Just wash its face, start the new deal on the new car. And so I'm quite happy to wait till March. At which point he said, give me 5 minutes. came back and said, if you sign for it today, you can have it today and you can wash its face and blah, blah, blah. And you can keep your car. Because the other thing was, he wanted me to pick it up on Monday. It needs to go to the dealers, the detailers to get done. I've got to be in Amsterdam Tuesday, Wednesday, so I need to get backwards and forwards to the airport. So I basically said to him, look, if you give it to the dealer on Monday, the detailer, on Monday, I'll pick it up on Thursday. I keep my car, so I'm still transport. So we did the deal on that one. So, there you go.
Everyone's a winner.
And if you want to buy a car, get it in January and register it in January. Even though you'll hit £300 or £400 depreciation come new reg day in March, as long as you're hanging on to it for 3 years, who cares? And this is my long termer. This is the car that I am planning on owning this car for the rest of my life. I will have other cars, but I am planning.
I'm very glad that this is being recorded. I think that's a very interesting thing to be.
This is going to be the summer car. It's going to get put away for the winter. It's going to get paid off in 3 years, and then I might get myself a little Fiesta ST or something as I run about, and it'll be used for car show season. That's the whole point of this one. I'll probably change my mind by next week, but at the minute that's
the plan, and he's sticking to it for at least the duration of this podcast.
Yeah. So you've been buying a new car, Kaz?
No, I'm quite sensible at the moment. I think I've got my dreams, but I stick to what's affordable and is a fair amount of fun. So I've got an Audi an Audi A4, but the S line limited edition, the TFSI.
Right.
Oh, at least it's a petrol one.
Well, at least it's a petrol. Yeah, I owned a diesel A4, and it was a nice car if you've given up on life.
Oh yeah, I've had 2 diesels in a row, both of them packed up because of the
DBF thing.
Yeah, it used to go orange, and you had to drive it like a drag racer, and then it would go red, and you'd have to drive it to the dealer, and then it would go green, and it would go around like that. So I wouldn't do diesel ever again, ever. Unless I
don't think the government wants you to either. So
no, quite. But I mean, like, you can find good deals on diesels. It's just because of the filter, because both of them had that stupid warning light.
What colour is it, Kaz?
Oh, it's black.
God,
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, Ed. We have probably insulted not only Kaz, but probably every other listener.
Oh God, look, that's fine. But ultimately, the dullest colour I anticipate owning cars going forward, if I have any say in the matter, is blue. I like blue cars, and there are some nice blues doing the rounds. But when it comes to hot hatches, you might, none of them, especially in the current design school, with the possible exception of the Golf GTI, which is still fairly restrained, most modern hot hatches look basically like someone who wanted to design trainers has been locked in a room and forced to design a car instead. So you might as well just go for it in, an offensive colour. Fundamentally, especially as you say, when you're not responsible then for selling it, and it's some other poor bastard's problem. So that's my take on this. On this, take my advice to heart, but that's my policy.
I think we better do a podcast. I think we better talk about some AV stuff, seeing as it's an AV podcast. We'll come back to cars later on, because obviously when we talk TV, the Grand Tour is back on Amazon, so we'll come back to cars a little bit later on, briefly. But I guess we need to crack on. So we've got some current competitions, Ed. Tell us all about them.
Right, you can win a copy of A Simple Favour on Blu-ray, which is open till the 28th of January. You can win a copy of Under the Tree on Blu-ray, which closes on the 23rd of January, so you'll need to get a shift on for that. Win a copy of Laura on Blu-ray, closes on the 25th of January. And you can win a copy of Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte on Blu-ray, which closes on the 1st of Feb. All of these competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK. So again, if you're tuning in from places that are not the UK, I'm afraid you can't win any of those Blu-rays, for which I apologise profusely.
Okay, any previous competition winners?
There are not, but we've just had Christmas. You're bound to have got something nice in the meantime. Just enjoy those and then crack on with the competitions.
Yeah, okay, right. That wraps up the first half of the podcast. We'll be back in a sec with hardware news. Right, so hardware news. I guess we could look forward to some of the products that we're going to be reviewing in 2019. And the reason I say that is obviously the last 2 weeks has been really hectic. Certainly for myself, being over doing CES and all the rest of it. And this last week, I have tried to basically just catch up on some bits and pieces, try and acclimatise myself back to UK time, and finish up on some stuff that didn't get finished before Christmas and the New Year rush. So that's what I've been doing for the last week. However, there is some stuff starting to pile up for 2019. We now know what some of the products are that we're going to be looking forward to. So for the rest of January, I am looking at what are the best TVs to buy from last year. Might sound like a silly question, but actually, now that we know what's coming out in 2019 and the prices that these TVs are going to come in at, which is, it's never on the cheap side. So do you wait till Black Friday 2019 before you buy your TV? Is there TVs coming out this year that has absolutely everything that you need? Or could you actually settle for a 2018 model, which at this moment in time, prices are now starting to come down quite a bit. So I'm going to be looking at that for the rest of this month. All the reviews are done. So basically I'll be putting together a video just what were our best TVs of 2018, what you can pick them up for now, and is it worth buying one now that we're into 2019, or is it actually worth waiting on the new models coming out? Like I say, I'm off to Amsterdam on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. That is for Philips launch event. So we don't know what Philips are doing just yet. Obviously, they have the 803 and 903 OLED TVs out in the market. They also have a couple of LED LCD TVs. But the new panels are out from LG Display, the 2019 panels. So are they going to be launching some new OLED TVs? Are we going to see some smaller screen sizes? Are we going to see Philips add Dolby Vision? I think they might just do that. Seeing as everybody else seems to be going Dolby Vision and HDR10+, it wouldn't surprise me if Philips do that. Will they be backing HDMI 2.1? Is there any need for them to be doing HDMI 2.1? I guess with Philips, low latency is an issue from last year. They didn't quite have the lag times that the competition had. They were lagging behind. Excuse the pun. 40 milliseconds was the fastest on the Philips, whereas everybody else was around about 20 to and under. So between 15 and 20 for everybody else, OLED wise. So that's going to be an interesting event. Obviously, they're also doing their LED, LCD TVs and other products like soundbars and so on. So it'll be interesting to see what they're coming up with. I expect Bowers and Wilkins will have a hand in the new screens, and I'm assuming there's going to be a new design there as well, where they can really go to town on the audio side of things. So that could be quite interesting, especially, something that you'd be interested in as well, Ed, I would imagine, is seeing where this traditional hi-fi manufacturer is going with sound.
Well, it's another, I've been remarking in my reviews that the headphone route into hi-fi companies for loudspeaker companies being modified and eroded by the absence of headphone sockets and the way differences in how we're using things. Yeah, essentially it's breathtakingly cynical but utterly necessary. You've got to find ways of introducing your brand and the expensive products to people when they weren't necessarily anticipating it, because brand recognition is everything in a world where the means of getting your brand recognized become ever more complicated. So yes, it's interesting to see how they're doing it. I'm hoping that beyond that certain level of cynicism, that a couple of these things are going to be good as well. That is another concern.
I've got to say, apart from being a little bit sibilant, because they were restricted in the space that they could fit the drivers in the 903 OLED TV in their little soundbar, I've got to say, in terms of audio, it really was quite impressive, which is why I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with it this year, now that they have a bit more say in obviously the design and where the drivers are going to go and so on. And another thing I really picked up on at CES, now as AV Forums members, as AV fans and enthusiasts, we always think of the screen as a monitor, so we never consider audio. Obviously, as a TV reviewer, I have to do that, I have to cover everything, but as an AV enthusiast, when we look at TVs, we generally look at them as a monitor, and we would have a secondary sound system, whether that's hi-fi or multi-channel. That seems to be the way of our thinking. So we always question the fact, well, why is it coming with a soundbar? Why is the Panasonic got upwards firing Dolby Atmos speakers? And, why is Philips doing this with BMW? There's no need for it. You only need a monitor. That's a very, very small section of the market that we think about, and obviously our listeners think about. What I picked up on at CES was everybody's adding speakers and high quality speaker solutions to their panels this year. LG, even the rollable TV, has a big base where you can fit decent sized drivers in and get a decent sound quality out of them. Like I say, Philips and B&W doing their audio, Panasonic with their lineup with the soundbar and the upwards firing Atmos speakers. LG also their lineup has always had some nice speakers designed into it as well, and Sony have done the same. So they've gone for acoustic surface on the AG9, which is the new OLED, and the ZG9, which is the new LED, LCD and massive screen sizes. It now has that almost the same approach. Obviously, they can't use actuators on a LCD panel, but it has a very, very similar design in terms of it's designed that the sound is coming from the speakers, so it's from the screen, So everybody seems to be spending a lot of time on sound this year, Ed, and it goes against what we think of, but we're just a small niche, and when you're looking at the wider market...
a little eloquent reminder that we are a niche of a niche.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you start kicking off and going, where's my monitor? Well, if you put down an order for 5,000 of them, you might be part of the way there. If a couple of your mates do the same thing, then someone might genuinely pay attention to it. But I'm afraid... And the half the problem is as well that in the early days of flat screens, where Plasma was the only game in town, the ability to sell monitors was as much driven by business as anything else. In this day and age, if businesses want monitors, they aren't going to go for OLEDs. It's not what they need. And they can buy socking great displays at bugger all cost, which will fulfill those requirements. Those are where those monitor requirements have gone. So high quality monitor screen requirements, as you say, tiny, tiny niche. You're going to have to accept the fact that I'm afraid your television is going to come with paraphernalia that you listener may not physically want. But if that's the means that it continues to survive at all, I think you ought to take that.
Of course, you're going to have Philips and Panasonic who tend to do a model with the speaker and speaker bar and a model without, with traditional hidden speakers. Yeah. So you're going to have some options with some of the manufacturers, but certainly the trend at CES this year, with all the manufacturers, so not just the big four, but all the Chinese brands as well, was to sell them with sound bars or sound solutions. So that's interesting. We don't expect the TVs to come in for at least another couple of months yet. So, like I say, we're going to be looking back at 2018, also going to be looking at some of the other areas in the TV market that sometimes we neglect, and it's not through choice that we neglect them, it's usually just through resource. So we will be looking at a bit more at the budget line, looking at gaming TVs, LED LCD TVs. What does your money buy you these days? We'll have a look at that. So that's for the next couple of months. Obviously, Panasonic's got their big event coming up in about 4 weeks' time in Frankfurt, and then we're expecting LG and Samsung to have announced their UK lineup by at least March and April. So that's the way the beginning of the year is looking. Other things that I'll be looking forward to are the JVC 4K projectors, the native 4K projectors at last. Hopefully we'll be getting a review sample through for those very soon. They have gone into full production now. The reason that there's a delay is that they found an issue with production, with a component, and it took them a little while to fix that issue, which is why they held back, and they didn't want to put product out there that they needed to recall. So they fixed the issue before that ever became an issue. It just means we're a little bit delayed in getting the product through, but hopefully we'll be getting that soon. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. Ed?
It's going to be a relatively gentle start to the year. We're about to cover some of the things I've been up to, and we'll be presently going through the system anyway. But we've got new monitor audio golds. That must be the sixth or seventh generation of those. I'm hoping to have a look at some of those in the not too distant future. And then there's a maddening number of things that I know are coming, but I can't tell you about, but a number of them are going to appear at Bristol. But it is going to be a busy year for Hi-Fi. And if the television takeout thing that we've got is beefing up sound and, doing cross support of, various competing formats, Hi-Fi manufacturers, hopefully not too late, a number of brands have finally started to work out how on earth do you reconcile the ability to sell affordable, and I genuinely mean affordable product, and how you might go about doing that in 2019 without either compromising your principles and doing all the things, and once again trying to bring your brand to the awareness of the mainstream. And we've got a number of things coming out. I have behind the scenes, I have been clubbing my way to the front of the queue as and when these things get announced, so that you guys will get to see some of them early. And there's a number of things lined up, and there's this month coming. I've got some other bits and bobs. I am reviewing an amplifier. It's a very odd one because it entered production quite a long time ago. Then it ceased production, and now it's back again. And the reason it's back again is because it's from a company which has now been taken over. It's under new management. And it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity because, one, it's a truly magnificent amplifier, first and foremost. Secondly, one of the other things that I'm going to be trying to do this year, because of the unique way that AV Forums reviews work for a Hi-Fi reviewer, as myself, I have as much or as little space as I need. I don't have to write 2 pages or 3 pages or 1 page. There's as much space as it needs to get ground covered. So there's a review in the pipeline that will be coming out in a category of product we've never covered before, which I think I'll be talking about in a bit. But then I'm looking at this amplifier. One of the reasons I'm looking at this amplifier is because it puts out 500 watts a channel. And that's not PMPO or 4 ohms for 2 seconds or anything like that. It will, if you hook it up to a rig, a test bench, put out 502 watts into 8 ohms sustained. And part of the review is going to be discussing why on earth you might need that, and what are the practicalities of living with an amplifier that can, if it puts its mind to it, melt almost any loudspeaker on the market.
The thing I was thinking about there, Ed, was your meter.
Oh, trust me, I plugged it in, and the little red light is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" The little red light that normally comes on when you're either running the power shower or the kettle. When you are giving it the beans, that starts flashing as well.
That's the type of kit I like. I'm looking forward to reading that now. It should be good.
I mean, the other thing I would say is that if you are immediately assuming that when I've just described that, the results of living with a product like this is that you look like the guy in that Maxell tape ad, with it just, being blown backwards in your chair. It's not like that at all. This is as much going to be a discussion about what the practical benefits of having this absurd amount of power to hand actually are.
It's something we always come back to, and I think it's one of these messages that does get lost now and again, and that's just having the headroom to do what it needs to do, to perform to a level it needs to perform to. It's all about headroom. That's, when it comes to designing a system, that's what you should be thinking about. You shouldn't be thinking about, how much power do I need to actually blow the windows in? It's how much power do I need in reserve to blow the windows in?
So yes, essentially that's going to be a big part of this review. But don't worry, it's also going to be a relevant critique of actually what is now, thanks to a price reduction, an absurdly competitively priced piece of kit as well. Okay. So yeah, we've got there's lots of things to talk about. I'm also open to feedback from readers, listeners, so on and so forth, about what you might want to see. We have a limited number of slots available. There are as much also some limitations to the size of equipment that I can cover, although I have managed to just manhandle a 35 kilo integrated amplifier in here. So, where there's a will, there's a way. But no, you are, without your support, these reviews don't happen. So if something has attracted your attention and we can get a sample of it, because that's not always a given, let us know. Let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Because I've got a number of things lined up, but there's always a bit of leeway, and I'd like to be in some way responsive, and we'll see where we go.
Okay, one from me, Ed. Is hi-fi restricted to 2 speakers and or a subwoofer? Is that the only way that hi-fi exists? And the reason I ask that is that I had probably one of the best demonstrations of audio I have had in probably the last decade at CES this year, and I haven't actually spoken about it very much. In fact, I haven't spoken about it at all in public. It's been mostly amongst.
This sounds a bit like the Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
You've been reprogrammed.
No, it was just one of these things that I forgot to talk about in the CES special, because obviously we had lots to talk about when it comes to our core subject of TV and so on. But I had a demonstration of 360 sound from Sony, and I have to say it was jaw-droppingly good. It recalibrated my thinking when it comes to wearing headphones.
Oh God!
The way that it worked is you went into this room. Now, this was off the show floor. Now, I understand that they were doing a demonstration on their stand on the show floor, but there was some stages of the demonstration that they didn't do with the general public, that they did with us in the off-site demo. So in the off-site demo, we basically went into this room and there was 13 speakers, 9 speakers at the front, and they were positioned on a height basis. So 3 across the floor, 3 at ear height, 3 at height speakers pointing down the way, and then 4 speakers for surrounds, so mid and height speakers for surrounds, and they were off probably about 45 degrees off at the back. So a traditional surround speaker position, but obviously with height speakers as well. So we listened to 2 tracks on these speakers, and then they came round to us. Now, the demos were limited to 6 people at a time, so I was sat front row, middle seat, as you do, fight for these seats at these things. So then this very nice Japanese lady came along, and she then placed microphones into my ears. I mean, tiny, tiny microphones.
That's disappointing.
Into my ears. And the guy next to me must have had small ear canals, because she kept saying, "I've never seen one so small," and I was trying very, very hard not to sneak her at that point. But anyway, we put these microphones in the ears, and then they sent, if anybody's used Odyssey or Dirac or whatever, they send you the sound pulses through the room, and obviously these little microphones inside your ears measure out your ear canal, because everybody's is different. And it gets a map, and it builds up a map for each person. It takes about 5 minutes for it to do the processing for the 6 people in the room. And then once it's got that, you take these things out again, put the headphones on. You handed a pair of headphones, and you listen to the 2 tracks again, and the sense of space was phenomenal, because you are convinced that the sound is still coming from the speaker, the 13 speakers, the 9 speakers in front of you, 4 speakers behind you. You are convinced that the sound is coming from those until you lift the headphones off and you realise you're listening to the headphones. Because you genuinely think that in this space, and it's an object-based system, you actually think that the sound is coming from the speakers, and it's not. It's in the headphones, because they've measured your hearing, your ear canals and so on, and calculated how it should sound. It was phenomenal. I've heard nothing like it, and like I say, probably the best sound demonstration I've had in at least a decade. And it gives you a whole new understanding of, or a whole new calibration, as it were, to what headphones can sound like. Because to me, headphones are great, but they always sound like they're sat on your head and that the sound's being pumped into your ears, whereas this was like sitting in a concert hall. And because it was object based, you could do anything with it. So you could have the vocals anywhere you liked within the sound sphere and that kind of thing. So it was a bit like, Auro 3D or Dolby Atmos or whatever with music, but through a set of headphones, and you actually had that feeling of space and depth and the positioning of the sound. It was phenomenal. I'll put everybody to sleep.
No, it sounds absolutely tremendous. I can't actually imagine having.
Sorry, I'd forgotten to unmute my mic. That's why.
I can't actually imagine getting much better than some of the Atmos I've been listening to, or the Atmos you get sometimes at the cinema. But I do appreciate that sometimes, like sticking a good set of headphones on. I mean, there's obviously a lot of headphone work going into when you're on a flight. Is quite immersive. It enables you to kind of get away from everything else that's going on around. And with a properly tuned up system, I suspect that would work.
I mean, obviously it was a demo. You're not going to have, when you buy the system, Sony are not going to send staff around to measure your ears, and that's not going to happen. So the final product, they're talking about an app on a phone where you take a photo of your ear and it'll do the calculations, and it'll put together a DSP map for how it thinks your hearing works, and then apply that to what you're listening to create the 3D sound effect. But
what was the format that the material being played was in?
Like I say, it was an object-based format, so it's an open source. Okay. It's an open source system. So now Sony developed this with another company. They could patent it and get royalties on it and all the rest of it. They are giving it license free to the industry.
But there is let's deal with the elephant here, because we have to. Ultimately, it's only as good as as the material generated for it.
Absolutely.
And essentially, as it stands, the entire back catalogue of recorded media, unless it makes a trip back to the studio to be tinkered with into this situation, it doesn't sound even like some of the legacy DVD audio mixes and Blu-ray audio mixes are going to be immediately ready to do anything with.
No, I think this was more of a demonstration, basically to say this is what we can do, this is the technology we've developed to do it, and we're going to give it to the industry license free. So not only Sony can develop these headphones and this app, but all the other manufacturers have access to it. And it's basically they're trying to get the format up and running, because we've seen these formats before. We've seen these object-based formats before. Auro 3D is a good example of that. What Wilfred Van Balen did with his invention, it was all music-based to start with. And then he took it to the movies. But he worked on the strategy of height speakers along with normal speakers on the normal plane, having the height speakers and mixing audio that way. And that's how he invented his system. But again, it was his system and licensing and everything else, and trying to get that off the ground when you got Dolby doing similar, you got DTSX doing similar. You've then got Auro 3D. You've now got Sony coming along with their version of object-based stuff, which they are obviously aiming at music. And they have plenty of experience in that. I mean, SDDS was a big system for multi-channel audio. Very, very early object-based stuff there. So this stuff's been around for years, as you know, Ed, and applying it to music has always been a goal for certain producers and so on. DTS did it for a long time. I've got a couple of DTS albums that are in 5.1 mixes and they're going back into the studio and done it. I know Queen did. Some of their back catalogue stuff was done into 5.1 and 7.1 mixes and so on. So it has been done. But in terms
of said, if you are going to do music in the round, headphones is the only medium in which it can be made to work. The only, because as you said, what you were listening to initially was 13 speakers. Let's be honest, that's ultra specialist territory. So this is this is the alpha and omega of it. If it can't be made to work here, it can't be made to work anywhere, and it will live or die on whether the media is generated to actually make use of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a proof of concept, it had me sold, and I want to know more about it, and I want to see how it develops. But as happens with all these things, it's down to the artists, it's down to studios, it's down to companies backing it up, and it's finding a solution where they don't have to stick microphones in your ears to figure out what you're hearing, because everybody hears differently. Everybody's hearing is subtly different because of the way that your ear is constructed and how sound enters your ear and so on. So it depends on how clever they can get the technology in terms of taking a photograph of your ear and then working out exactly how you hear or how it thinks you hear, and then applying that to whatever it is that it's applying it to, and then the content that follows with that. As a proof of concept, I was sold. But then again, it's CES. You get plenty of proof of concepts every year. Very, very few come to market.
Let's see how it goes. But I mean, as I say, I have nothing, and I've remarked in the past. I find headphone and earphone listening to be a very satisfactory way of listening to music, more so than you do. So I'm not far from averse to it. I just think that essentially there's more pieces that need to be put into this than Sony themselves can fulfill. So open sourcing it, that's a good start, but we'll see.
Yeah,
there's a lot has to be done.
It's nice to see that approach, though. After everything that's been going on recently, I mean, the last time we had that kind of approach, we got DVD out of it, and DVD went on to be a huge success. So it'd be nice to see if taking that approach and saying, well, actually, we're prepared to share the royalties on this one, see how it develops. It could be quite interesting. And like I say, lots of launches coming up as well. So that's what we're looking for in terms of 2019. In terms of the next few months, it's basically consolidating on 2018. We'll finish up a lot of the TV stuff that we've been working on as well, and getting ourselves lined up with these launches, see what's coming up, and then we'll start putting together our lists for the year in terms of when we're going to cover things. But lots of exciting stuff. Turntable-wise, Ed, I did see a couple of new turntables from Technics that were quite interesting.
For different reasons, but yes.
And now I managed to get hands-on with them, which was quite rare, because obviously they just showed them at the press conference, and I believe they weren't on the stand down in the main hall, although I didn't go on the stand, so I could be correct on it. I've got a funny feeling these were pretty rare to get your hands on. I've got to say that the one without the pitch control and the lights and all the rest of it, I think it was the 1500, the SM1500C. I've got to say, for a hi-fi turntable, I think that could be a real contender.
That is hi-fi for grown-ups.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It represents. It's on the list of things to be looked at, and make no mistake, it's going to be a very significant thing for a number of other companies to deal with, because yes, it's essentially, if you realize that you can't be bothered with a number of the sheer faff of it, that's going to turn up in a box with all the bits that you need. It's going to be built like every other piece of Technics equipment, and I mean new Technics equipment rather than some of the badged horrors at the end of the last iteration. It's going to be an interesting one. I personally believe, based upon the specs and its probable performance, that it's under cartridged. I mean, sticking an £80 cartridge on it as standard, I think, is a bit cheap. But that said, we don't know exactly how much it costs yet, so I may have to eat those words. But nonetheless, it does. If you are looking at Project's offerings, or even Riga, who are very, very good at giving you a sort of everything you need to do, and it's all good to go, it's just going to make a lot of other things feel a bit made in a shed, and I imagine its performance is going to be entirely in keeping with that as well. So I am looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that was interesting. It's funny you mentioned build quality, because it was sitting next to the SL1200 Mark 7. Now, I thought 1200 was silver, this was in black, and it had 1200 on it. So we're obviously not doing the 1200, 1210 thing with this. It's been pitched as a DJ turntable, going back to its roots. As you know, I've been trying to find a Mark II, SL1210 Mark II for a number of years now. Yeah. You either get one with a really nice body and no lid, or you get one with a really nice lid and a body that's scratched and used and worn and so on. Very, very difficult to hold on. So I thought this was going to be the answer to my prayers. And you'll notice that I'm saying that quite negatively because the build quality really was quite disappointing, Ed.
Well, it does look like this is going to be a lot cheaper than
this looks like it is based on the chassis that Audio-Technica use and Newmark use and so on, because it was very plasticky. The buttons, the start-stop button was very, very plasticky. The stylus light, really plasticky, really loose. Didn't have the nice little button next to it with it you press and it rises up nice and slow and all the rest of it. Didn't have any of that feel with it. And then the pitch controller, there was no centering. So when you get the pitch close, you normally get that center lock. It's gone. So it just felt cheap. Now it is going to be cheap. And when you look at the other SL1200 turntables that they've released, the G and the GR and so on, they are built like tanks. They are audiophile quality. They are, materials are fantastic. They do not compare in any way to the SL1200 Mark 7. It just feels it's built to a price point.
It will be. But that nonetheless, it's fulfilling a different requirement. I personally still feel that the GR is the sweet spot of the set. I will undoubtedly try and get my hands on a Mark 7 at some point, but I have to say the 1500 for me is a higher priority. I think it's the more interesting product. Yeah. But the one thing I would say, wider than Technics, if we're looking at having seen the feedback on sales of vinyl and some of the hardware, some of the early Christmas season feedback, I think it is fair to say this is the high watermark. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have said this a couple of years and been proved wrong, but nonetheless, based around how sales have gone over this season, I think it's now you have to work on the principle, if you're making these things, that there are going to be fewer people coming through the door starting, and you're going to have to start competing for the existing people who want to stay in the game and consolidating.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an interesting one, and it's exactly the same as what happened with the headphone market a couple of years ago. If you are a new arrival to this, your product has to be absolutely outstanding, because otherwise the established players are going to eat you alive.
Yeah, so you'll get a bit of disappointment in my voice. I am a little bit disappointed in how that's turned out, because I have fond memories of SL1210 Mark IIs that were built incredibly well, that were built to probably the same level as the GR or the G in terms of the materials used. Maybe not the same sound quality, but certainly as the materials used. Now, that was when Technics had a production line, and they were making hundreds and hundreds of these every year and selling hundreds and hundreds of them every year. I get the fact that they're not selling hundreds every year now, that a TJ turntable is only going to sell in small numbers. Pioneer have probably got that market sewn up in terms of the DJ turntable, but they want to bring the Technics brand back in there. I absolutely get that. It's just that what I was looking for is not fulfilled by the Mark 7. It's cheap and it's built to a price point, and it's not something that reminds me of the Mark II. And I think if you're of that thinking, and there's a few of us out there who, have fond memories of these turntables and want to add them back into your system now, it's probably not the turntable to look at. I'd probably be looking at the G or a GR, if that's what you want. If you want one for
used an XDEM GR are starting to filter through. So, and that would be the sensible way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus, we're talking about turntables, Ed. Next, you're going to tell me we're reviewing cartridges.
Well, it's a funny old thing. It's funny you should say that. We are, but I need to be very clear about this before you go, what the bloody hell are you doing? As I said earlier on, one of the things I'm going to try and look to do with a couple of reviews this year is, if there's the opportunity to cover as much about the information around it as there is reviewing a product, then I'm going to take that and with both hands and run with it. Audio-Technica has released an entire range of cartridges. Now, people do that all the time. It's not that. That's not news. What's newsworthy is that these cartridges are exactly the same from £29 to £180, except for the shape of the stylus. Every other part is exactly the same. So, bless them, they sent me all of them, and because it's again, the way I can review things on AV forums is different to most other locations. I have looked at all of them, and we've essentially started at £29 and worked through. And what it has allowed me to do is talk about not only review a product quite comprehensively and in a way that is very difficult to do in any other format, but it is a genuinely extraordinary demonstration of just how much difference a tiny piece of industrial diamond makes. So please rest assured that this is not the start of a flood of cartridge reviews. I imagine the only time you're going to see any more of them is if it's a case of there being another range where I can arrange with the people selling it or building it that I can test the whole damn lot of them, and also they'll have to be relatively affordable as well, because the reason I've chosen these is to say they go from £29 to £180. If you have a turntable and you're listening to this, the chances are the cartridge it has on it, it's probably actually going to fall somewhere within that remit. So these are ideal if that cartridge on your turntable is beginning to sound a bit sad. And as I say, the other thing is that you can start with the £29 cartridge and you can change the stylus to any of the other models, and it never has to be taken off the arm and you have to do the fiddly changeover or things like that. So you could start now at £29 and you could change it to a £180 cartridge. And all that you have to do is snap off a piece of plastic and snap on another piece of plastic. It's a very unusually simple thing in record player terms, because most of the time they're nowhere near as benign as that. So again, this hopefully, if you've been looking at cartridges and going, well, what's the difference between that one being elliptical and what's the difference between that one being microlinear and so on and so forth, I've done my best to cover what all of these terms mean, why it should, in theory, make a difference. And then I've looked across these cartridges, because it's been a fascinating opportunity to actually do it, where it is the only variable in an entire system, all the way from the stylus to the speakers, where literally one tiny thing is being changed each time. And it's quite impressive. There are increments where the differences are genuinely unprecedented. I would have loved to try to find a way to have made that something that you could have listened to, and I'm looking at the mechanics of seeing if that's something that's practical to do. But as you might imagine, there are hardware and licensing issues that I have to overcome, so none of us go to prison. Equally, there is one increment in there where I don't think it's worth it. So have a look at it, and if you, as I say, if you've got affordable Project turntables, Riga turntables, and actually any other number of the damn things, have a look at this review, because it might be the answer to what do I do to change that? And it also, you might find it's quite instructive in terms of just what the whole business of stylus, shape and design actually means. I mean, to be very clear on this, as I said, there aren't going to be dozens of these things, but when it comes to the whole idea of teachable moments, that's something I will be trying to make a big deal of across various different formats and so on and so forth, because we have a unique opportunity here. And I do see the same questions being asked again and again and again. So if I can kill two birds with one stone across the course of the next few months and years, then I'm going to try and do it that way.
Yeah, and no birds were harmed in the making of this content. Let me just put that out there. Yeah, okay. Right, so I guess that wraps up hardware news. We've got a podcast coming up next week, which is, I think it's end of the month podcast next week, isn't it? So we'll save snake oil for then.
Oh no! Well, I would say that by that stage it will have passed through. I know a number of people who'd messaged me were asking, when's it coming out. I hope that it, in some way, met your expectations. I know for a few of the more fundamentally minded, I think you probably find I've been a bit gentle.
You see,
I think
it deserves a spot on its own next week, because I have been really impressed with how many people have taken it on board and have replied, and some of the replies have been absolutely genuinely hilarious. And I really want to give it time on the podcast. And if we did it, if we did it this week, we'll be trying to cram it in, and I want to give it its own little space where we can go through some of the replies as well, and some of the absolute.
I think that is
brilliant.
my highest replied to piece I've ever done.
Yeah, it is.
Because at the time of listening, it's at 201 replies, many of which, as you say, have been very, very amusing. So thank you for that.
Right, so that's Hardware News. We'll be back in a sec with some movie news. Okay, so movie reviews and news. We don't have any reviews. Don't think any of us has managed to get out to the cinema yet. There's some bits and pieces I do want to go and see, so I'm going to try. Probably not this week. This week's a bit busy. But maybe before the end of the month, I'll get out and see some bits and pieces. But as we are still in the new year, entering the new year, Kaz, we had Steve's best films of the year. We haven't had yours. So what were your best films from 2018?
Well, I knocked up a top 10 best movies of 2018, but didn't ever get the chance to go through it on podcast. I mean, we've already had dozens of comments on this one, because I'm not sure they were the most kindly received choices, at least some of them. But the top two, I think, were agreed upon by a large majority of people, which is a relatively rare exception in my experience, because neither of them is in the least bit going to be an Oscar contender. And to reflect on a year where the best movies of the year are likely blockbusters is saying something. It'll be interesting to see what the Oscars say about that. But I had my top two as being Mission Impossible Fallout and Avengers Infinity War. And whichever way you want to put them around, the two stomping excellent movies, tremendous pieces of filmmaking, put together for audiences to really enjoy on a number of different levels. I mean, the Mission Impossible saga has just gone from strength to strength, and Fallout just builds on everything before. And Infinity War is exactly the same. It's 20 movies behind it, and they've invested everything into this massive ensemble effort. It's something we've arguably never seen before on this scale, and I think they're both excellent movies, and that there's nothing else that's come close to them this year. And it's an interesting thing, because it is a year where we've had Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie, where we've had things like Three Billboards, which is more commonly going to receive all the Oscar nods. And even things like A Star Is Born, Bradley Cooper's directorial debut. I think that any other year, these would be the ones that people look to. Maybe look to Ryan Gosling in First Man. But a lot of people are agreeing that best movies last year were Infinity War and Fallout.
Yeah, I've got to say those were the top two. And again, we haven't even mentioned Ready Player One. Now, in any other year, if a Spielberg film, when he gets back to form, doing what Spielberg does best, would be mentioned left, right and centre, but it's been such a strange year that it's kind of fallen by the wayside, that film. And again, it's one of my films of the year, I think.
I really enjoyed Ready Player One.
I'm looking forward to watching it again, for sure.
I missed it at the cinema, and I kind of regret that, because it would have been really enjoyable at the cinema. I have no idea what caused me to miss it, but it was one of those things which I didn't get around to until relatively recently, and it was a lot of fun. It's like Ed says, watching it a second time round has got to be the place to pick up all of those notes.
Yeah, and I've got to say, there's good fun watching it on a projector screen and pausing it, and you're trying to pick up everything that's in the frame, and it's amazing just how much is in each frame in terms of Easter eggs and so on. There's loads in there, so I really enjoyed that. Right, so that's 2018. Let's move to cinema releases for 2019. You did a feature on this as well, so what can we look forward to? What can I look forward to spending my unlimited card on this year?
Going from Avengers to Avengers, we got to finish off what Infinity War started with Endgame. That's got to be one of the most anticipated movies of the year.
It's probably the only surefire thing that is going to drag me from my shed to a cinema to actually see. And in the same way that Infinity War was one of a tiny number of films that managed that last year, it has a pull that, it transcends the fact that, as you know, I am a recluse and I hate the cinema, and I think it's not necessarily great value for money for those on a non-unlimited card system. So even then, it will still encourage me to go. So yeah, that's a big deal for sure.
Yeah, but the question is, did Deadpool spoil it?
Well, I don't know whether.
Obviously, if you haven't seen the end credit sequence, you maybe don't know what we're talking about there. But he basically says this is the plot for the second Infinity War. Right?
I remember that. Andy kills Hitler as a baby, doesn't he?
Well, yeah,
as you do. It's not the only Marvel movie out this year. We got Spider-Man: Far From Home, which ironically, you say, did Deadpool spoil it? Did Spider-Man: Far From Home spoil Endgame? Because even saying that one of the films to look forward to this year is a Spider-Man sequel is kind of a spoiler.
No, but does it not take place in the time frame before Infinity War?
Nope.
And also, but can we be clear about this? I don't want to be in any way offensive,
Yeah.
but I'm a brutal realist here. Whilst I do not believe everybody who disappeared at the snap of a finger is coming back, that's the nature of things. I think we probably have to weigh on the side of the predictability that Marvel is not in the business of ending an arc where half the organic matter in the universe died.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're not gonna, and they would have had me more convinced if they had done less important characters. But by the same token, they could have kept Spider-Man 2 under wraps a little bit longer.
Oh no, that's a different argument and one I'm not party to. But I just want it from the position of being a cynical man.
Totally. But the knowledge, it still doesn't mean you want to know who and how and why. I mean, I completely agree, and I think it would have been better if they'd have kept it a little bit more low key, like that was pun intended, and wiped out a few less people. But it galls me that like a couple of months after Endgame, we're going to get a Spider-Man sequel. It's set a year after the last Spider-Man movie, so set well after the events of Endgame. So, I don't mind. I know there's going to be one, but if this had been another Iron Man movie or another Captain America movie, I think people would have been really disappointed because their fates are really up in the balance. Yeah. But it does fly a bit in the face of the concept of keeping that under wraps. But we've got Spider-Man afterwards, and we've got, more importantly, Captain Marvel before, which is set in the 90s Top Gun era of jets and a very young Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury. And I think that she's going to be absolutely pivotal, not only in Endgame, but in the future of the whole Avengers cycle. Because it will have a future, just have maybe different people, or different people even in the roles that we've known from before. But I think Captain Marvel is going to be pioneering that. As someone said before, she's almost certainly, the actress Brie Larson's almost certainly signed up for 3 standalone movies and 3 Avengers team-ups. So it'll be interesting to see what March's Captain Marvel brings.
Does anybody else look at a film being made at a point? I mean, obviously, I know that, Phil, you're a bit older than me without rubbing it in. But this is a point. It's a retro film about a point where I was largely a functioning proto-adult, and that makes me incredibly depressed.
I think there's a definite trend for nostalgia at the minute from a certain.
But it's also nostalgia where they're looking back at a point before I was born. I can handle that, but. Nostalgia. I mean, it's just a symptom of getting old. I know, but it was one of the first trailers I watched. It's like, oh, bloody hellfire!
Yeah, unfortunately, you're getting old, Ed. You just have to accept these things.
I'm fully conversant with getting old. I'm fine. It's just it's an angle on becoming old that it's obviously it's the same thing with overhearing youth talking about certain things with a sort of studied in comprehension. It's like, come on, it's not that hard, and all the rest of it. So no, that's but in the same way, it does look actually quite a good film as well. So
well, we finally hit the era of a generation of adults that don't remember the millennium.
Yeah.
Which so it'll be interesting when that becomes a piece of nostalgia.
On just before I forget, because I know, but if you have got some time to kill, there's a video doing the rounds on various social media of two teenagers trying to dial a number on a rotary dial phone. I'm honest to God, it's one of the funniest things I've seen in months. If you can find that, it's genius. That's fantastic. So. It's
all right. I've seen my 5-year-old son trying to use my TV as if it was an iPad.
Oh yeah, that's
it's just why won't this? Why can't I just press it? Why can't I swipe?
Yeah. Well, obviously mine. I didn't realise I can shout at my television or shout at the remote and make it do things. He figured that out because he's just used to shouting at things to make it work, including his parents. So that again, mate. It's, what can I say? The world it's all going horribly wrong. That's why I'm huddled in front of an electric fire under a blanket like an old person in those crisis episodes. So I'm just embracing my role now.
So anyway, for those of us that are sociable and going to the cinema this year, anything else that's worth looking at, Kaz?
Well, there's a slew of Disney movies. I mean, we've got live action adaptations of Lion King. We've got another Toy Story, which people aren't gonna want to miss out on, and we've got Dumbo, which people maybe are going to want to miss out on.
I do. It's my favourite animated Disney film of all time, and I just can't bear to see it. I don't care even if it does turn out to be good. That's great, and I still won't watch it because Dumbo is perfect as it is. Doesn't need to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's not drawing me in. But there's a bunch of original offerings which look quite good. Brad Pitt going to Neptune and Ad Astra. That looks interesting.
He's not going to Uranus. That's a shame.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Tarantino, his latest, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All-star cast, DiCaprio and Brad Pitt again, headlining that. We've got Ryan Johnson doing crime thriller Knives Out with Chris Evans and Daniel Craig.
And with his absence, also put a note in for that Fast and the Furious spin-off as well. Some of the photos coming out of that.
Sure, I can't wait for Hobbs & Shaw. That looks like a lot of fun.
It does look like a film that gives precisely no shits about what you might think. They're just going to have a great time.
Now, you see, I now feel like I'm missing out on the joke here because I haven't seen any of the Fast. I've seen the first Fast and Furious, and that is it. So how do I quickly get myself into this?
Right, so here
you can't. You have to watch the whole lot.
No, you don't. You can skip the second and third movie. You can watch the fourth one, and that'll be the toughest run for you, watching the first and the fourth. And then once you hit the fifth, it's just easy, plain sailing, because they're all increasingly stupid and so much fun.
But the fifth is the equivalent of tipping a bag of kitchen waste into an oven, turning it up to 800 degrees, shutting the door, leaving it for an hour, and a Michelin-starred souffle comes out the other end. It's just so unlikely.
It is, yes.
that something like that. I mean, and it's just incomprehensible.
It's where the first comes in, isn't it?
Yes, I would say for Phil, your saving grace is having at least some interest in cars.
Yes,
you might be able to stomach second and third ones as well.
Yeah, I would. You would, but I don't want you to watch the second and third and be put off, because actually the franchise gets really, really good, and there's a lot of fan service later on. They actually seem to care about, if I were to call them that, characters. It's just a surprisingly effective multi-part franchise that no one.
I suppose if you didn't watch the second and third, they would avoid some of the chronology issues as well.
I don't think it would make any real difference.
I mean,
I don't think
this is polishing a
It's
particular
because
polish on it. But yeah.
they don't have Vin Diesel in it, so he clearly didn't think they were that important. And when he came back in, he did tie the show back together. And then as soon as Dwayne Johnson comes in, it becomes a bit more like the Rock show. He becomes a bit more important in it. And then, of course, now you've got the spin-off with him and Jason Statham. I mean, you need to catch up quick because we do have Hobbs and Shaw, but they are a lot of fun. They're not just stupid.
Withers will loan you his. Come on. Very well.
They need to be watched.
Okay.
Anyway, just to round up what we've got left, I would say the last couple that I'd really look out for is, and I can't avoid saying it because he's who I grew up with, like in terms of classic movies, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Harvey Keitel, and Joe Pesci under Martin Scorsese for The Irishman. I mean, I am looking forward to it, even though they, in all four of them, I don't think they've done a decent movie in like 15 years. I still really hope that this turns out to be good. You know, those four reuniting, I say reuniting, they've never been as a quartet under Martin Scorsese, but those four getting together, working for Scorsese. It's Netflix's biggest production. It was supposed to be 100 million. It's gone up to like 165 million in budget. It better be good.
Is that why our subs have all gone up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is that why all the prices have gone up?
Just for The Irishman. Well, it sure as hell wasn't for the money they spent on that black and white film, Roma. And the other last film to watch, John Wick 3 Parabellum.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this.
Yeah.
I gotta mention it. I won't watch the trailer because I won't really watch trailers for films that I know I want to see. I mean, yeah, I can't wait for it.
I have watched the trailer, Kaz, and there's no any real spoilers in there, but if you want to keep yourself completely clean, I wouldn't watch it because there are some introductions of characters that we haven't seen before, so that may spoil it for you. But I have watched the trailer, and I just want to see it even more now. I mean, it is gun porn of the highest level. Absolutely.
Yes, it is, but it's phenomenally well done. I've watched the last two so many times now, and it actually has got a lot of skill put into the combat and the gun combat, the gun fu, as they would call it. They put a lot of time into thinking how people would actually react in these situations. It doesn't just look like crazy choreography, like you move here and I'll move here. It looks like that's what people would do if they were ridiculously highly trained and could shoot and go into those situations. It's bone-crunchingly good. And Keanu at like 52 now, I mean, he's up there in my esteem with Tom Cruise jumping out of planes and, you know, jumping onto helicopters. I got a lot of time for Keanu Reeves to just come out of nowhere, come out of, you know, the recesses of Hollywood and suddenly train himself up to be
franchise. Yeah. Ian McShane as well. Ian McShane is now pretty much if you need it is unquestionably a niche character actor portrayal, but if you need that niche done perfectly, he's just bloody ridiculously good. Who would have thought that Lovejoy, it must be said, very much in the second half of his life, would be quite the figure in these things that he is. I think that's just
he plays a really good character in this, and I've got to say though, John Wick 2 is a painful watch at the start for me. It really is.
Well,
just what they do to that boss, it's just, and you know it's a fake. Card,
yes, what they do to that body shell, it's stunning. So yeah. But I noticed we haven't mentioned Star Wars. I don't know about that.
What's fun? I mean, it's gonna get a lot of people going out and seeing it, but I can't say it's one of my most anticipated. It's one of my must sees of the year.
I'm just waiting to see. I'm just waiting to see if JJ does a Bobby Ewing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't know how to read Abrams because after what's happened to the Star Trek saga. I'm not sure. And looking back on his film history, I used to really, really rate him. But I don't know whether he's just really good at fan service.
It has to be fan service. There's no other way they can do the third one in this trilogy, other than fan service, because they tried something different. Well, they say they tried something different, with Rian Johnson, and basically all they've ended up doing is really damaging a potential big money maker for Disney, and now they're panicking. It has to be fan service. It's going to be nothing but, which is, on the one hand, I'm joking by saying it's going to be a Bobby Ewing, but they have to do something to get the fans back on side. And it's interesting that Mark Hamill is on the cast list for this. It's interesting that it'll be interesting to see which way he plays it, to be honest. But it's going to be fan service, no doubt about that. They have to win back the audience, otherwise they're going to park the franchise for a while. They're going to have to park, and that might be why they've stopped development on these standalone films and starting looking at TV serialization instead, and looking at that area, because I think he's done a lot of damage, and I'm surprised that they're still going with his trilogy, to be honest. But this has to be fan service. It'll be nothing but.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. It's not. I say I'm not falling over myself. I'm just not that excited about it. But we'll
I couldn't care less about Star Wars. The realization that I've come to, and I think Steve's the same, and I've got quite a few of my friends are the same, that we're all about the same age. Star Wars is not for us anymore. It was for us when we were kids in the 70s and 80s. It's moved on now. I mean, the prequels, we didn't like the prequels. Although, again, there's quite a bit of revisionist history going on there as well, because if I remember right, The Phantom Menace, it wasn't a stinker straight away. I think people were genuinely impressed with the film and so on. It was only a little bit later that the hatred started to come in, because, again, the internet was in its infancy back then. But it was starting to drift away from me during the prequels when I was in my 20s. Now that I'm in my 40s, it's not for me. It was never intended for me. And if I get upset at it, I'm only getting upset at myself, because it's really not for me. And I've come to that realization now. So it can be anything it wants to be. I will go and see it. I'll probably hate it. And we'll talk about it in the podcast, no doubt. But
have long and bitter. Well, actually, no. What we'll do is we'll just wind Steve up, let him rant for an indeterminate period of time. I will go on mute and get some emails done whilst it happens. So,
yeah, that's it. So, is that the wrap up for 2019 so far, then, Kaz?
Yeah, I think that's 2018 and 2019.
It does sound like. I mean, it does sound like it's the long feared, Hollywood implosion appears to have been forestalled for at least another 12 months. It sounds like there's some crap. It does sound like there's some some big ticket stuff that, and hopefully at least some of it delivers. So, yeah, it sounds, on the face of it, there's reasons to be cheerful there, if that's your cup of tea. So,
yeah.
See how we go.
I mean, normally we do disc releases and so on. There's not a lot coming out this week. There's Crazy Rich Asians, A Simple Favor, King of Thieves. I think the big one's Waterworld Limited Edition, Kaz. I think that's definitely worth a pickup.
It is. 3-disc edition with the fabled Ulysses cuts, which is a bit like the 3-hour TV version, except it's completely uncut, so it's got added scenes in it. I mean, it's a much... It's flawed, but it's a much better, more comprehensive version of Waterworld. And I had a lot of fun. Ever since I saw it back in the day in the cinema, I've had a lot of fun with Waterworld. I don't really get why everyone hates on Waterworld. It's Mad Max on water.
Yeah, I see. It's weird. I've always found it a relatively entertaining piece of cinema. But to be honest, I have. Whilst, don't get me wrong, he did produce some absolute cinematic turds. Dennis Hopper is compellingly watchable in Waterworld. I think he's absolutely brilliant in terms of just scenery chewing magnificence. And yes, I mean, people sort of go, oh, it's a bit, talking about various natures of where sea levels would actually be if these happened. I think that misses the point a little. It's the same with the Mad Max universe. What I have pointed this out in podcasts in the past. Unless you do incredibly unusual things to it, the actual not safe, the shelf life of petrol as petrol before it starts to disintegrate and doesn't work as petrol is nowhere near long enough for people to start hammering around in a post-apocalyptic event in anything, let alone something which then happens to burn a lot of petrol. So
Yeah.
let's leave. As I've said in the past, the apocalypse will be conducted on bicycles.
Yeah, I mean,
And there aren't enough bicycles in apocalypse films.
No,
because they are
doesn't sound as
actually
good, does it? The last of the Priuses versus the last of the V8 Interceptors.
I'm not suggesting for a second that anything other than the Interceptor is acceptable, but as a different niche for post-apocalyptic films, there is an inadequate use of bicycles.
The last of the penny farthings.
Well, not even that. Let's face it, it doesn't take a huge amount of engineering expertise to keep a push bike up and running, and your ability to cover ground on a push bike. It's up there with your ability to cover ground on a horse, and you don't need to feed the bike. So this is obviously an argument for a different. When we have a slow.
It's a very different BMX Bandits film. That one.
So on this basis, Waterworld was far more logical because he didn't need any fuel for.
No, he didn't. He drank a lot of his own piss. Let's be clear about this. But
yes, filtered. But it was a working trimaran that they had that, and it was kitted out like the last of the V8 Interceptors.
It went like the Clappers, yeah. It was all good.
I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. I mean, I think a lot of people think it was a flop as well. It wasn't necessarily a flop, was it? It cost a hell of a lot of money, and but it actually made its money back. It just wasn't very well received critically. But I've got to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I haven't seen The Long Cut, so I will probably pick this up at some point. Right, so UHD Blu-rays. There's nothing coming out this week, or nothing that I could find that was coming out this week, unless you found something.
Actually, Crazy Rich Asians and Simple Favor are both out, and I'll be reviewing them this week as well.
Right, so they're 4K as well, are they?
They're 4K as well, yeah.
Okay, so there we go. That's disc releases this week. Right, so let's talk about latest TV shows and streaming series. Kaz, you've been having a really busy weekend this weekend.
To release them all in one day.
Yeah, they did. But I guess one of the big ones there is Star Trek is back. Discovery is back for season 2. I have not seen it yet. I'm desperate to see it, but I've got a Panasonic there at the minute. It doesn't have Dolby Vision, so I'm trying to film what I need to film on that, and then kick that for the C8, get the C8 back, and then I'll sit down and watch it. But what did you think?
I thought it's tremendous. You've seen season 1, right?
Oh yeah.
All right, okay. So I mean, I think it builds upon everything from season 1, and gives us some nice mysteries to explore in season 2. It introduces a new captain, which makes things interesting, and there's a hell of a lot of very well done action. And I say that in the sense that not many TV shows have the budget that can make action seem like it's almost out of a big budget Star Trek or even Star Wars movie for some of the sequences. It's actually very, very well realized, seamless effects.
Yeah.
And you're watching an hour-long episode, which was a whole lot of fun and made me all of a sudden maybe not that disappointed that the movies have failed if they can make this quality TV. Not all the jokes hit, not all the characters work, much like the first season. But it's nice to have Michael Burnham back. I'm still not getting on wrong with her name, but it's nice to have Michael back, and it's nice to have some new cast members, and a couple of them work really well. I love the new captain, and there's a new engineer who is very funny,
right?
But in a good way. And I think it's great telly.
Now, my concern, Kaz, was obviously the first series was it was co-funded by Netflix, who basically put up a shed load of money, which is why it looked so good first time around. But my understanding was for season 2 that Netflix were not putting in as much money, and that could have had an impact on the look and the design and the special effects and so on. So I am assuming with what you're saying that it hasn't had much of an effect.
You can't see that in the first episode. So they've either done one or two things. They've either exactly. They've either found a way to find more money for the rest of the episodes, or they put it all up front in the first one, so it'll hook you, and then the rest of them are going to be spent on the bridge in a ship where the power's gone out. So we'll see. It could be a small claustrophobic drama stuck in the shuttle lift for the next 10 episodes.
Can I just say that randomly the other night, because I was bored and I couldn't be asked to operate the record player because it was too far away and outside of my blanket, I rewatched the Next Generation episode Darmok for the first time in
close to 20 years, is it?
I think I have watched it this century because it was on Sky and it's like, oh, I've seen that. But it's the first time I've watched it in a long time, certainly a decade. I had forgotten what an absolutely brilliant premise. And I actually had a look on Wikipedia about it. And what's his chops? Russell T Davies loves the premise of that episode so much, he's never watched it because he doesn't want to spoil how he thinks it is.
Okay.
I'd forgotten just how bloody marvellous, how clever. And also, the bloke who plays the alien in it was the police officer the black police officer alongside the guy who plays the cyborg in Aliens, who defends the police station against Arnie. Fun fact. So there you go.
Wow, you've created a silence here. Excellent.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to just picture them. Yeah. Lance Henriksen as the guy, but I kind of know. Is it Paul?
I can't remember.
Something like that?
Yeah, something like that. That sounds about right.
Well, anyway, that's the best I'm doing on racking IMD Kaz.
Yeah.
But Discoveries is so much fun, but I don't ever sit there and go, "Wow, that was clever." In fact,
it's
the opposite.
Not high concept. Is it?
I go, really. I'm not going to think about these spore drive. I'm not prepared to think that's not high concept. That's really low concepts. Let's
MacGuffin
that way around. Yeah, exactly. And in terms of plotting, they go for one shots a lot. And the bigger twists certainly across season one were really interesting and really nice, but they didn't spend a great deal of time with them. They're like, they're bad. Oh, you didn't see that coming. But I think that really clever Twilight Zone-esque era plotting and kind of Machiavellian scheming of Next Generation. I mean, we need a little bit more of that, and that's why I think Picard will bring it back.
Right. Okay. See, the thing for me though is, as much as I loved it as a kid and as I was growing up and as a teenager and so on, Next Generation is of its time. Is very, very much of its time, and I find it quite painful to go back and look at it now and watch some of it because it was so much of its time. And I think modern viewing tastes and so on has moved on light years from where we were back then. So I absolutely get it and I understand it, and as a teenager I loved it, but now it just seems too much of it's too 90s. Too much of its time.
I completely agree. I can watch the original series all day long today, but I can't watch Next Generation because it just doesn't work. It looks too dated and it doesn't work. But I still think that they could put some cleverer plotting into the MTV generation of movie making. I just don't think that they figured out the way yet, at least in terms of this.
Yeah.
But
well, we'll see how it goes. It's good that it's on anyway. So
it is.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it.
I would, in the meantime, because there's only one episode of that. There's only two episodes of True Detective up. Everyone's got to get on with binge watching Punisher season 2 because that's phenomenal
could you
viewing.
be clear about the everyone?
I've no interest.
Okay. Have you seen any of the Marvel TV shows on that?
No.
Right. So.
Well done, Kaz. You're about to have the hardest sell of your life, but on you go.
Right. Bear in mind that also, as they're in 4K, they also eat into my extremely limited bandwidth. So not only do you have to convince me that they're good, but you have to convince me they're so good I forego having the internet available for other things.
Before I watched Iron Man, I had very little interest in Iron Man as a character. I didn't really care about. He was like a side character in comparison to people like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, even Hulk. Like these were the bigger ones. Who was Iron Man? And Robert Downey Jr. came along and absolutely nailed Iron Man. And what Marvel have done, and in combination with Netflix, which is why it's such a shame that they've got rid of them, is they've really nailed some tertiary characters. And Daredevil is really, really good, in no small part thanks to having the best superhero villain out of any TV or movie that I can think of. It's in Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. I mean, he's a phenomenally good bad guy, and really well developed bad guy, which you can get out of 13 hours of TV, which you can't always get in a movie. And they've done that with Daredevil. They did it. They spun off in Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and Luke Cage, and I would say they stretched themselves too thin. But as a byproduct of all of this, because you could skip all of those, and you could just go straight to the Punisher, because the Punisher has been through so many different versions over the decades, from Dolph Lundgren to Thomas Jane to Ray Stevenson, and no one's ever got him right until Walking Dead's John Bernthal stepped into the role, and he's like Jack Bauer injected full of adrenaline. He's a brutal bruiser, and he is actually a really interesting character who's had his family slaughtered and is on a permanent vendetta, and who no one seems to be able to take down. And they really try. They torture him and they shoot him and they cut him up and they beat him to the ground, and he just doesn't stop coming. He's a pitbull of a beast. And the Punisher is better than Daredevil, and some of the best superhero, and I use that term really broadly because he is just a guy with a gun, superhero TV you'll get. And this latest season has got scenes comparable to The Raid, to John Wick, and to Heat in its 13 episode runtime, and actually an entire episode that plays out like Assault on Precinct 13. I mean, it's phenomenal viewing. So
I'll put it on the to-do list. I'll put it on the to-do list. I've got some records to get through as well. So
right. So anyway, TV wise as well, I did mention it in the Star Trek bit there, but the Orville is coming back. If it's not already back, I think it was the 19th it was coming back, so it could be that it's there. I'll have to double check that one. But I thoroughly enjoyed the first season. It's very much Seth MacFarlane, but again, it's also very much classic Star Trek, I think. And I think for those Star Trek fans that didn't get on with the first season of Discovery, probably would find more in common with the Orville in terms of classic Star Trek plot and so on, but with adult humour. And I did enjoy it. I know a lot of people didn't like it, so I think it's very much, again, split down the middle as to whether you get on with it or not. I don't know if you saw it, Kaz, or...
I did. I watched a few episodes of the first season, and I would say whether you liked or didn't like Discovery, you should definitely watch it. I mean, you should really hinge it entirely on whether or not you like the original series of Star Trek, which I did, because it's the closest you're going to get to that.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
the original series.
Yeah, and there's some good chemistry going on there. There's some good little subplotting and so on, and not as much of the Family Guy humour, which I think works. I think it works that he hasn't gone down that route. It'd have been too easy for him to go that way. It really is quite clever, and you can tell that he's a real Trekkie. And a real fan of the genre, because the attention to detail a lot of the time. And of course, you've got Jonathan Frakes, who's directed quite a few of the episodes in season 1 as well. So, I think one of the producers as well is a Star Trek producer. So it's quite a bit of prominence there with Star Trek. So that's coming back. Keep an eye out for that. And like I said right at the beginning, the Grand Tour is back. You either love or hate the three of them. Mainly Clarkson, I think, rubs everybody up the wrong way. I've got to say, there is some vast improvement. Although we're only one episode in, there's not as much studio time. And I think this is where it's really struggled the last 2 seasons, was they were trying to do too much in terms of the studio. Special guests, guest stars, stars in reasonably priced cars, all that kind of thing. They were trying to keep it too much Top Gear. This season, certainly going on the first episode, there wasn't as much studio time.
The event.
It's more about the films, and there was 2 or 3 films in there, and the first episode was great because the first the main thing was they went to Detroit and drove American Muscle. So obviously I'm interested in that. So it appealed to me. So there was a Mustang RTR in there. There was a Camaro, and there was the Demon, the Dodge Demon.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. They also had the McLaren Senna, the most ugliest car you've probably ever seen, but in terms of performance, in terms of aero, in terms of what it does, a phenomenal piece of engineering. And again, it's back to where the strong point was with when the guys were on Top Gear. The strongest point there was the cinematography, was the way that they put the films together, was the way that they presented it, and you got a feel of the character of the vehicle and so on. They've gone straight back to that this season, and going on the first episode, I'm going to give it a lot of time because I think they're finally getting back to what they did best. Now, a lot is scripted, but a lot of it was laugh out loud funny as well. I mean, some of the jokes were absolutely spot on. There's some of the childish stuff in there and so on, which you expect. But for me, I thought it was strong, although I will thoroughly expect people not to like it, and I accept that. I accept it is a bit of an acquired taste these days to watch those three. Have you seen it yet, Ed?
No, I'm hoping that we can finish this podcast so I can actually bloody watch it. I don't want to entirely, drop hints here, but I need to go for a wee, and I need to have my tea, and I need to watch the Grand Tour, and it's 20 to 9 in the evening, and I've run out of beer as well, right, unless I go to the kitchen.
Now you see, this is what Ed gets like when he starts the beer and then he doesn't get any more. This is what Ed gets like. You can't
just have one pissing beer. This whole American thing, let's go out for a beer. No, let's not. We either go out for no beers or we go out for many beers. All right? So, yes. Right. I also need to get the bins out.
Right, so Ed says we're pissing finished this podcast, and so on that pissing bombshell, that's it for this week. My thanks to Kaz Hallow. Is that
like a turd that won't flush.
And Ed Selly.
If you'll notice the arterial nature of the blood coming from the hole in my head, you can assume we're all about to have a real lousy day.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and also Bookback AV Forums, so latest reviews, news and video. Of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.